Hello everyone, this is CounterYolo bringing you another video in Star Trek Online. Today was just announced and given the stats for the new Temporal Warships for each faction in the game, so we'll be going over those comparisons. There aren't a ton of warships and destroyers in the game, frankly, so the Starship Comparisons section is going to be rather short. However, the Starship trait, at least by the sounds of it, seems like it's going to be really strong, so we'll actually have a decent section talking about the Starship trait itself from it, or I guess technically the 4 Starship trait variants of the Starship trait. Here's the lowdown for everything that's going to be going on in this video. Feel free to see the time links to warp to these particular sections. First off, for those of you that don't know, there's technically 4 different factions. I've always treated them as just 2 because prior to right now, they've always been treated as just 2. With the trait that we're getting from these starships, they're actually going to be treating these as 4 different factions now, which is going to be interesting. Basically, overall in the past, Starfleet had the best starship selection, especially for science. The Klingons were originally designed as the PvP faction in the game with cloaking. The Romulans kind of took that up as being the basically better version of them, especially if you ally with the Klingons, because then you get access to some of their better ships. And a jem'hadar Vanguard fleet, I mean, they're basically just a Federation or a Klingon captain that started at level 60. And whenever you ally with them, you basically got all access to every single one of their ships, including the ones that Romulans couldn't access whenever they're allied. It's interesting. They also have the Vanguard mechanic that all captains are able to access with those ships if you unlock them from the C-store. These new ships don't have any of that unlocking stuff on it. It just is automatically available to everyone, which is cool. Those are the 4 factions involved. All the other allies we technically have, aren't technically allowed to help design ships with the rest of them. Not sure why. Perhaps Cryptic will eventually add some of the rest of these, especially the Cooperative, because I mean, the name of this board has Cooperative in the name. So maybe they're hinting that they'll add the board Cooperative in the future. In terms of warships itself, for those of you that didn't watch my Starship Classes Explained video, warships are basically just escorts that are slightly slower and slightly bulkier and don't have an experimental weapon. If it's an escort that is extremely bulky, like a cruiser, it would be a juggernaut. And that's why some of those are really strong inside the game, just as an FYI. Other than that, they're basically the same as a regular escort, with the exception of no experimental weapon. It's just 8 neural weapons. They always have a 4-4 or 5-3 layout. And these new Temporal Warships, there's 4, and these are the first fleet available warships inside the game. Previously in the game, it was always destroyers were from the fleet and warships were from the exchange, besides like 2 exceptions. Now we actually have our first warships available from the fleet. I think a lot of this just comes down to the fact that destroyers aren't really that popular, but warships are. And Cryptic obviously wants to make the most money as they can, which is totally reasonable. I mean, most people like warships. The jem'hadar Vanguard warship from the C-store is super awesome, so why not? There's the basic stats for it here. It's 5 tactical, 4 science consoles, which is nice. It's a commander tactical temper operative, but like some of the other recent fleet starships, they have 3 lieutenant seats on it. Depending upon whether you're willing to work around it and working around the lieutenant commander's science, depends on whether or not you're going to like this starship. It is going to be a hard starship if you're going to do aux to bat for this build. You literally have to have both these lieutenant seats as engineering and do both lieutenant abilities as aux to battery, and then have your 2 ensign abilities as emergency powered weapons and emergency powered engines, and that would be all of your engineering abilities. I think this works a little better as a half bat with Atomic Officer 2 with 1 aux to bat here, but that's just my personal opinion. I'm obviously not an expert in builds in the game, so other people can probably do better builds than I can. I'm also a tank player, but anyway. In terms of the stuff itself, this is what the C-store version is. The fleet version has 10% higher hull and shield than an exterior console. But here's the raw stat differences between the 4 variants. The Federation version and the Romulan version have the exact same base stats, just that the Romulan version has a battle cloak and a singularity core instead of the Federation version of no cloak, and a regular warp core. If you're okay with singularity cores, then just ally with the KDF, and now you have 3 different starships you can actually choose from in terms of the raw base stats. Just gonna throw that out there to you all. Yeah, the KDF one actually is going to have the highest hull of all of them, which is going to be cool, which I will point out in just a moment. And the jem'hadar one has the lowest hull of all of them with really high shields in comparison. Also, the C-Star one has a Starship trait and console. The Starship trait seems like it's going to be fairly overpowered, especially since most people use attack pattern beta inside the game right now. That gives Fire and Cycle Haste, plus it passively will enhance a certain energy type, depending upon your faction. But moving on to the fleet versions, they have 10% higher hull and shields, and you get an additional science console on top of it. As was clarified to me just a couple hours ago, Romulan and jem'hadar starships are flyable by all factions. It's just the Federation and Klingon ships that are only flyable by their respective faction and their allies. So basically what it comes down to is, with these starships, for any character on your account, 3 of the 4 starships here are available to fly for you. It doesn't matter if you're Federation, Romulan, KDF, jem'hadar. 3 of these ships will be accessible to you. It's just 1 that will not. Either the Federation version or the KDF version is not accessible. The other 3 will be. And if you're going to be someone that wants to unlock the Starship trait, it's going to be the same trait for all 3 of the ships that are accessible to you by your faction. It doesn't matter what ship it is that you're unlocking the trait on, it's going to be the same trait on all of them. Which is going to be interesting because it actually means that you don't necessarily need to buy the whole bundle. And I'll talk about that later as to whether or not you would want to buy the whole bundle. There's basically only one new skin as well, and that's from the Federation version. The other 3 factions don't get any cool extra versions when you buy the C-Star version, which might also be an incentive for you too. When it comes to Starship Comparisons, as I said, this is going to be a fairly short section in this video comparatively to a lot of the other videos, just because we don't have a lot of warships and destroyers in the game. So just as some lowdown here, here's the fleet versions of all the ships. The base stats for the Federation and the Romulan version is the exact same. Just that the Romulan version has a singularity core and it has a Romulan battle cloak, while the Federation version has a regular warp core and doesn't have a cloak at all. Other than that, the ships are going to be the exact same between these two. The Vanguard warship, the temporal version, has a much lower hull and much higher shields. The Klingon version has a little bit higher hull and a little bit lower shields. And the Klingon one also has battle cloak. The jem'hadar Vanguard one has the wingman mechanic, which is also interesting to point out as well. This is the only jem'hadar starship currently, well, as of like 2 days on PC, that is available from the fleet. This is something we've basically been waiting for a while on. So if you're someone who is free to play using a jem'hadar character and want to use a jem'hadar starship for endgame and want a tier 6 one, this is the most affordable jem'hadar starship in the game. So that is definitely something else that's really good going forward this pack. The Romulan ship is also insanely good too, but we'll cover that towards the end of this comparisons part of the video. Now, I'm going to get some flack for this for sure, but the outdated version of this, or basically was almost the updated version of the low-buy temporal destroyers. These ships are definitely way cooler looking, but if you're okay working around the 3 lieutenant seats and are okay with a lieutenant commander science seat on this, these ships honestly are a bit better than the low-buy temporal destroyers. It's a 5-3 layout instead of 4-3+1. The KDF version even has stats that are pretty comparable to this thing. Normal movement is basically the same, just that you have a commander tactical temporal operative instead of a lieutenant commander tactical temporal operative. So you got like a reconstruction on these ships, and this guy doesn't. This ship is still going to be in decent demand though, because it's got a pretty good console. The enhanced Mannheim device gives you passive extra stats for science builds, and his clicky is also pretty good for survival on science type builds, because science gets a lot of threat inside of this game. But yeah, that's just my personal rant on this. I personally think these ships are better, but these ships definitely still have their usefulness as well. These ships are decently versatile because of the universal seats on it. But if you're okay with the seats on this ship for your personal playstyle, these ones should perform better. Alright, so for jem'hadar starships, because we now have a bit more to talk about, I thought it was good just to compare this new fleet starship to the Raider and the Warship from the jem'hadar Vanguard Big Pack. Just comparing the little stats between the two, just kind of showing us a little bit more to you all, just because honestly, when I saw the stats for this thing, it reminded me a lot of like, well, if we combine the Raider and the Warship into one ship, what would that be? It basically is this ship, to be honest. With the exception that you also have a Temporal Warship seat here too, which isn't on either of these ships. But I think this is a really nice, cool blend kind of between these two ships. The Vanguard Warship, in my opinion, is still a bit stronger. I mean, this is a really, really nice bridge officer seating and really great stats considering everything else in the game. But especially if you want to do, here's a good way to put this. In my opinion, this is basically on par, if not better, than the jem'hadar Vanguard carrier when it comes to exotic-oriented builds for jem'hadar Vanguard starships. We don't have a true jem'hadar Vanguard science ship in the game at the moment, and so at the moment, I would say this is the best ship available for science builds. But that's just my opinion. We'll probably eventually get a jem'hadar science ship whenever Cryptic decides to finally put that into the game. Who knows when that'll be. Of course, we also don't know whenever they're going to get the the jem'hadar veteran destroyer either. But in the meantime, here's two destroyers from the fleet as well. As I said, this is the first warship available to the fleet. Prior to this, we had a couple of destroyers available. There also is the Garumba Siege Destroyer for the KDF, but that one also has a 4-3+1 layout as well, but it has a little bit better turning. The Lafayette and its KDF version were the destroyers released about this time last year-ish, more or less around this time, plus or minus like 2 months. Was about time when this destroyer was released last year. It was interesting. Its concept was higher shields, lower hull, which, you know, these warships kind of fall in that same type of vein of thought, except it's now a 5-3 instead of a 4-3+1. A little bit more in line with the meta at the moment. The veteran destroyer, I still think is pretty awesome. You don't see this flown a lot because, I mean, only lifetime subscription players can get it, but it also has a 4-3+1 layout, so unless you're a torpedo captain, you're probably not going to fly this thing unless you want to fly it just for fun, which you more than definitely can on this ship. When it comes to the exchange, in my opinion, the strongest warship from the exchange is the Hasnok warship. It falls in line a lot with what the temporal warships are basically trying to do. This one just has better stats and a bit better bridge officer layout to pull off a lot of what you would want to do. Plus, the privateers set is also pretty nice. Unfortunately, the better console for this ship is on the Miradoran Raider, and the better console for the Miradoran Raider is off of the warships. So it's kind of an interesting situation there, honestly. The Counter Imperial Warship is a nice, stable, old ship as well. A time limit of dilation set exclusive to this ship and the Zal and a couple of other specific ships as well. It hasn't really scaled that well into the game, so the set kind of sucks nowadays. But I mean, it's still a solid ship overall. You got a pilot temporal operative combo on there. I think the new warships are just better. I mean, that's kind of state of the game, though, in that a lot of the newer ships are going to outpace a lot of the older ones. Of course, though, when it comes to warbirds, I have to include this just because when it comes down to it, this warbird right here is accessible to all captains in the game. These other two are not. This one right here is. So, for a TLDR for this slide, if you're wanting to fly something like the Temporal Warbird, but can't because you're not a Romulus captain or can't afford this ship, our new Fleet Temporal Warbird is a great alternative to it. In fact, in many ways, in some particular ways, this ship can outdo what this ship can actually do in a lot of circumstances as well. It's just your stats are going to be a little bit lower than what this ship will be. A little bit higher, a little bit lower hull, a little bit higher shields. Also a little bit less maneuverable, but I mean, just kind of the way it is. Also, this is an enhanced battle cloak, not a Realm of battle cloak. I mistyped that. It's an enhanced battle cloak, just like the Fleet Tavara Light Warbird. For other thoughts for this video, we also have to talk about the trait and the console. The console is kind of a, well, the console, the way they made it sound was that it sounded like it was a quantum or a projectile clicky that bypassed shielding and also gave a passive boost to phaser, disruptor, plasma, or polaron, depending on what faction that you're a part of. A lot of this comes down to stats. If it's a good stat console, like point defense bar warhead off of the NX, then it might be a decent console to add to a starship. Otherwise, a lot of people will probably just ignore this thing entirely. The starship trait itself, depending upon your faction, will depend upon what the name is called. What it comes down to it is if you use Temporal Alpha abilities or if you use attack pattern beta, which is a pretty staple attack pattern on most DPS builds nowadays and also on most tank builds nowadays, it will give you firing cycle haste, plus it'll give you a passive boost to either phaser, disruptor, plasma, or polaron, depending upon what your faction is, whether it's Federation, Klingon, Romulan, or Dominion. For me, this is interesting because I really love polaron damage. That is my particularly favorite energy type to use for tanking because piezo polarons from the Lucario reputation is really, really nice, especially for tanking. And so if I'm going to optimize for this trait specifically, I would actually need to start playing jem'hadar captains. That's an interesting concept for me. I will still need to think about that more as to whether I want to commit to that. A lot of that will also depend on how good that boost actually is. If it's an okay boost but really great firing cycle haste, then I could probably be like, well, that's okay. I'm not fully utilizing the full trait, but firing cycle haste is still always nice to have. A couple big concerns that I had initially was, well, we're getting a jem'hadar Vanguard warship before we're getting the Veteran Destroyer for jem'hadar, which is interesting as well. Another thing for the Starship, obviously, is there's 3 Lieutenant Bridge Officer seats for this, but I mean, it's a pretty nice fleet alternative to a low-buy Starship, so I think that's an okay compromise. Also, the ship can be hard. These ships can be hard on people who want to do an Oxtabat build. Because Temporal Science isn't necessarily the most desirable thing to have for a lot of captains. The Starship trait, I think, is going to be part of the new meta. It also embraces some of the C-Star token stuff in the game. I believe there is a thing about those tokens in that, like, within like 6 to 9 months or something like that, you can't use the token for like the newest starships in the game, so you have to wait a little bit if you're going to use it. But after a given amount of time, maybe you'll be able to use your token if you've earned it at this point through the various things in the game to get the starship if you so choose. If you're going to use this trait, attack pattern betas is almost a must-have unless you're doing a almost fully exotic-oriented build with some energy stuff on it. Also means attack pattern delta for tanking is pretty much dead until they add a starship trait to help enhance it more. It also means that if you're trying to do a Tetraion or anti-proton build, you're kind of left even more in the dust than you were before. So it's kind of unfortunate there too. Just as a little rant here, this is going to be an interesting financial experiment for Cryptic. They've been saying for a while that they're on an upward trajectory to make more and more money out of this game. This is going to be interesting because they made 5 ships for this pack. They made they made 1 starship for each one of the factions, And then they made the alternate skin for the Federation one because a lot of players play Federation only. I think it's going to be interesting just because if you only want the trading console from these starships, you only need to buy one starship to unlock it for every character for every faction. Whether it's the Romulan one or the jem'hadar Temporal Warship. I think this means, especially if they expand this to start being retroactive to other Romulan ships as well besides this one, you could see a lot of people starting to fly scimitars in the game, which that would be interesting. As was quoted in it, for the first time, non-Romulan characters will be able to fly the Warbird included in this bundle. Also, non-Dominion characters will be able to fly the Vanguard Warship in the bundle right away with no Tier 6 mastery involved. Tier 6 mastery, it sounds like, was an experiment that they didn't want to pursue further. I thought it was a cool concept and that they might be able to add it to exchange starships, but I guess that's not profitable for Cryptic, so they're not going to do that. So basically, when it comes to this pack itself, as of in like 2 days, it's going to be at 6,400 Zen for all 4 starships. After the sale, after like a couple of days or so, it'll go back up to 8K Zen, and during the sale, it'll be 2,400 Zen instead of 3,000 Zen for each starship. If you buy the whole pack, you also get a 50% off C-Store Starship coupon that you can use for another starship in the C-Store. Keep in mind though, if you buy the pull pack, what it basically means is you're paying 6,400 Zen to get 3 Admiralty starships for every single character on your account, which I think is if your thing is Admiralty starships, that's a decent deal, to be honest. For me personally, I already have enough starships for the Admiralty for all my characters, so that's not a big deal. But for some of y'all that are newer to the game, that might be something that's of pretty good value for you. Keep in mind also the only C-Store skin that's added is the Federation version. All the other starships don't get any cool skins with the C-Store version from what it looks like right now. So if you only want, if you want that skin and the trade for all the characters, that is where, in my opinion, the 6,400 Zen is basically worth it, because you also get that coupon too along with it. Otherwise, in my opinion, just buying a Romulan Republic or the Dominion Starship from this pack is going to be the way to go. So just as an FYI to you all, I'll be buying both. I'll be buying one of them on one of my accounts, and on the other account, I'll buy the other one. Just because I think this is going to be a pretty good trade overall for a lot of my builds. And also for tanking in general, I think this is a really solid C-Store trade to put as your 4th Starship trade. Alongside his, remember, emergency weapon cycle, and then either redirecting rays or withering barrage for a lot of your energy-oriented tanks inside the game. Yes, there are definitely better traits out there. If you're a Federation captain, on or dead, can definitely take the place of that trait. You definitely can argue for that. If you have 5 trait slots, these 4 plus honor dead's probably, in my opinion, going to be it's probably the way to go. And then you choose whatever faction that you want to use for your energy type to get the most mileage out of it. The meta right now is phasers and disruptors, so Federation or KDF. If you want to do plasma, Romulan's the way to go. If you want to do Polaron, then Dominion's the way to go. Which I like because of Polaron, so that's going to be nice for my Dominion characters. Okay, so for the TLDW for this video, we have 4 new Temporal Warships added to the game with fleet variants. So there's 4 ships in the C-Store, there'll also be 4 ships in the fleet. The same type of thing as it's been before, and that if you buy the C-Store version, then the fleet version has a significant discount in fleet modules for its cost. Go down from 5 modules to 1 fleet module for it. The other cool thing about this is the Romulan Republic and Dominion starships in this pack, as well as in the fleet, are available to all characters in the game, not just Romulan or Dominion characters. Available to all captains, no tier 6 mastery required to unlock them. They are just unlocked and available to everyone. And then also, depending on whether you're aligned with the Federation or the Klingon Empire, you'll get access to their starship as well. So you'll get access to 3 of the 4 starships in total in the pack, which is insanely cool. It's really awesome that they added that. For the Starship trait, they're actually starting to make it so that having different factions actually matters in the game, and that for the new trait, whatever you use, attack pattern beta or any temporal ability, you get fire and cycle haste for all your weapons, as well as a boost to a particular directed energy damage type, depending upon your faction. If you're a Federation, then you're a phaser, then you'll have a boost to phasers. If you're Klingons, you'll have a boost to disruptors. If you're a Romulan captain or Romulan faction, you'll have a boost to plasma, and if you're a Dominion captain, you'll have a boost to Polaron. I think that's pretty cool. If you only care about the traits, if you just you only need to buy one starship, and that trait will dynamically change depending upon what faction that you are. So if, for instance, let's say for instance you bought the Romulan starship here, and decide to level it up on a Federation character, even though it's a Romulan starship, you would see the Heart of Soul starship trait there for you because you're a Federation character. So I think that's a really cool addition. In my opinion, this trait should be decently strong on anyone who's doing an energy-oriented build. Yes, there will probably be some stuff on the exchange and different traits there, like from the Miracle Worker Juggernaut, that might make it so that you might not be able to fit this on one of those builds. We will see on STO builds as to whether this actually makes it into that it has to be meta, that it's going to be making into the meta builds for DPS. But in my opinion, for meta builds, at least from C-Store unlocks traits only, this should make it. But that's just my opinion. I'm a tank player, not a DPS player, so I see the game a little bit differently. But yeah, that's a TLDR. If you're wanting all of the ships or wanting the Federation skin plus the traits unlocked for all factions, not just Federation, then buying the whole pack is worth it. Otherwise, in my opinion, just buying the Romulan ship or the jem'hadar Vanguard ship is going to be the better option for you for the pricing inside the game. All right, hopefully the video was enjoyable for you all. I do have some real life stuff going on again, so I had to rush a bit through the preparation for this. So hopefully what I said wasn't as jumbled as it was in my mind, at least. And yeah, if everything goes well, I will see you all next week.